Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business, and tonight we will complete our dive into the last of the unholy trinity. This is the end of Reaper's Creek. When we last left our hero, he had rolled over to God's house to start some shit. And he got in a fight with God and a bunch of other insane nonsense. Chapter 22. The Mother of a Better World. All around the world, I could hear people screaming. I could see them being violated, robbed, beaten, and broken down in every way. They were made in the corrupt God's image. Some represented his good side, others were the embodiment of his evil. I grew tired of the sound of suffering, as I could not only feel their pain as they felt it, but it distracted me from Cull, from finding the answers not even I could provide with all my knowledge and power. I had improved the world when I gained full realization of my ability, but that didn't stop nature from taking its course. I created the body to be my better half, to stand when I could not, and now I had a great task for him. The body stood next to me, waiting for me to vocalize a decision for our next actions. I knew the body could hear the screams as well. I knew he could hear my thoughts and my focus on the pain of the world. I spoke. I need you to... In the middle of my sentence, the body disappeared. He knew I wanted him to be better than God, to be better than the Reaper, and to reverse the destruction God caused when he killed his own sister. First, that would require the body gaining knowledge of how the world truly was before God, to analyze the code and see what was changed when God wiped out all of his sister's children and made poor, corrupted imitations of them. While my creation could focus on the issues of the world, I could focus on Cull. Unfortunately for me, Cull was a god of gods. You would assume to locate someone at the absolute height of the universe's hierarchy would be difficult. But in fact, chronology was my first strategy to locate him, and the strategy was effective. As usual, I had opened a black rip in reality, so I could effectively scan through the data of the universe. The code. I searched back to God's initial code creation, the first time it existed in all of existence. God was, in fact, not only created second, but at the apparent request of his sister. She wanted a brother, someone to guide and inspire with her creations. However, Cull did not code God properly. Cull made many mistakes with his daughter's much younger brother. To give description to the timeline of Cull's creation to God's creation would be best explained through comparison. The dinosaurs were a creation of Cull. I could see this in the signature and coding style of Cull. The explanation for their extinction, from what I could understand, appeared to be unintentional. The more I analyzed Cull's coding, the more I realized he was nowhere near as thorough as his daughter. Millions of years after the dinosaurs came humans. Just like God came after Cull, only in a time frame of trillions. The more I compared God's code to his sister's and then to Cull's, the more I understood exactly what had happened between Cull and his children. More importantly, through all my analysis, Cull became incredibly easy to find. He had not moved since the death of his daughter. I focused my energy on instantaneous travel. I simply replaced my current location with that of Cull's, only approximately 20 feet away from him, in an area with no conflicting objects or hazards. I did, however, input a modification to my own physical form to ensure Cull would not detect me, and it worked as perfectly as I planned. Before me sat a man in a stone throne, gray as you would expect. The handles of his throne cut sharply into rectangular shapes, the back raised far above his head and the legs blended into the ground without seams, almost as if the chair had grown into place like a tree. Above me appeared a small glimmer of light that somehow illuminated the whole room. It was as if I was in a cave, with a tiny skylight hundreds of feet above me. The room was surrounded with indentations in the gray stone walls. It was the basic code. I first learned to modify basic elements in my life. Within seconds, I identified the code as the different variations of Cull's daughter, the process he went through to create her. The man in the chair before me, Cull, his skin was like glass, only the color of gray. I could see his eyes under his closed eyelids. One was blue, one was red. He had no beard, no hair on his head, but his face looked so tired and old. If I had to compare Cull's appearance to that of a person on Earth, I would say he resembled someone who was 145 years old. He had wrinkles everywhere. Even under his dark blue, shiny garments, I could see he was shriveled and hunched. After analyzing the room and the man himself, I decided I would make myself appear before him. As I lifted the veil around me, he slowly opened his eyes and lifted his head towards me. The man's face began to shake gently, his blue eye filled with tears. Without a moment's hesitation, the man began sobbing in his throne, throwing his face in his old withered hands. I spoke out loud to the man. "I'm sorry you are hurting. Cull." The man whimpered and struggled as he spoke back. "I couldn't do it. I'm sorry." I could see his emotions like anyone sees color. They radiated out of him like ink polluting other colors as they're simultaneously submerged in water. I could also see, feel, and hear his thoughts in code, my own emotions, and my mind. As Cull continued to cry, I realized why God had wound up the way he did. Cull created his daughter when he was midway through his life cycle. He created God towards the end of his life cycle. His daughter had become so lonely, and creatures that were not her equal did not satisfy her intellectually or emotionally. As part of the code, she could not create her own, as Cull knew such a creation would force her to shorten her own life. Knowing his daughter wanted a brother of equal status so badly, Cull created God with his own life force. But Cull, having so little left, made mistakes, leaving him powerless to correct them and powerless to help his daughter if they were ever at odds. Cull spoke with more composure than before. "I entered this world with gray eyes. Becoming a father provided me with feelings, thoughts, and hopes I had never felt before. I knew I made a mistake with God. I know how this sounds, but even if I could change him, I don't think I would have. My only regret is that I could not die in the place of my daughter." The man continued to cry for a moment in front of me, then struggled while continuing to speak. "A father's love for his child. Even I cannot change that. You give everything you have to your children. I just wish they didn't have to suffer because of my mistakes." What? The more I observed Cull's words, his face and his code, I could see how genuine and remorseful he was. I imagined using my power to bring his children before him, only leaving the aspects of God's corrupt code behind. But I knew Cull would not be satisfied without his authentic, original children. I spoke aloud to Cull. "I've seen your code, and I know that you cannot see mine as a result of my own evolution. I know you are incapable of bringing your children back, and I know the pain you feel. I have seen much of your life play out before me through the many lines of code that make you who you are, Cull. Cull replied, somewhat agitated. We are more than code. My son and daughter were living, breathing gods. I stepped away from Cull and turned back to him to look at the walls around us. I spoke aloud to Cull. You only display your daughter's code on this wall. Cull replied, It was in memory of her, my last bit of strength left after the creation of my son. I ripped through the wall of the universe to search for code once more and found his daughter's code in the exact form it was just before she died. After modifying the universe to my will, I turned around to Cull and lifted my arm. As my arm raised, the walls around us transitioned to show God's code instead of Cull's fallen daughters. Cull's eyes widened as he silently watched the world around him shift. I spoke aloud. You won't need to remember your daughter anymore, Cull. She's standing right next to you. Cull's stare became weak. His head began to dip forward, and he collapsed in his chair. He could feel his daughter coming back to his reality, as she was, just how he remembered her. The woman was beyond description. I had seen no one like her before. The moment she gained consciousness again, she immediately went to aid her father. Seeing them reunited, knowing their troubles were mostly behind them, I felt confident in the future. They would influence without God to end what the world was, or his own sister once more. It was time for me to go home. Almost there. Chapter 23. The Black Nightmares. I decided to travel home in a slower manner than usual. I had a lot of thoughts and feelings I needed to give my attention to. While I was traveling through space at thousands of miles per hour, I still had hours before I would arrive home. I felt like crying after seeing Cull see his daughter for the first time in so long. It made me wish I had someone to return to myself. I felt dead to my mother, and my other family seemed to have nothing but negative feelings towards me ever since the incident with my mother's eyes. The only people left in the world who I knew loved me was the body and Julia. Thinking of Julia, my pain from what I had just seen and felt turned to concern as the last time I saw Julia, I had given her the crushed reaper. I decided it was time to stop flying and get to where I was going. Ripping open the code interface, I found myself next to Julia seconds later. Julia was bathing when I arrived. Seeing her in a bathtub made me burst out laughing. Julia was not surprised to see me there. Thanks to how I changed her code, she knew I was coming. She spoke aloud. I know, Daniel. You could simply alter the code or make yourself not get dirty or even clean yourself right away, but not everyone has lost the simple things in life, you know? I smiled and replied, Sorry, I've had a rough day. It's nice to see something like this. She smiled back and replied, I'm sorry for being so I cut her off mid-sentence with a kiss. As I leaned in, kissing Julia, she grabbed me and pulled me into the tub as I screamed and laughed. With little thought, my clothes were off and we were kissing much more heavily. Hours passed. We found ourselves lying in bed, talking about numerous things that had changed in the world over the last few weeks. After a while, the Reaper came up. Julia had placed it in a thick metal box by itself in the ground outside. After looking at the code in depth, I realized I had evolved to a point since the body changed me that I could easily remove the Reaper from this world without consequence. I finished him without a second thought. I spoke aloud. "Thank you for watching over that for me." She replied, "You just erase things, don't you?" I replied with a sigh, "If I don't remove certain things from this planet, people will get hurt." Juliet looked away from my eyes and spoke. "I know, but some people care about the people you erase, Daniel." I went silent for a moment, and then, after thought, I spoke again. "I love you, Julia. I'm sorry my actions have hurt you." Julia's eyes began to water again, so she buried her face in a pillow. After a while, her emotions calmed, and we fell into sleep despite not needing to anymore. I woke up the next day to the smell of breakfast. As I rubbed my eyes, I could see a massive blur standing there before me. My eyes focused, and I realized it was the body. He spoke. "So I got fired," I exploded with laughter. I immediately dove into the body's thoughts and saw that Cull's daughter had returned to Earth. I could see the changes she had made were extreme and elegant the moment I looked into the updated code. I searched for code of prisons, military bases, even cancer hospitals, and they were all gone. Cull's daughter had done what I was afraid to. She didn't acknowledge opinions or cultures, and simply rebuilt the world in the way she deemed fit. The body had informed me that he had already done half the things she was planning to do before she stepped in and corrected some of his shortcomings and took things a step further to more closely remember her world pre-God. The body spoke to me. "She has a message for you. I'm sure you already know it though." And he was right. But knowing something and focusing on it are two different things. So I was glad he brought it to my attention. The daughter of Cull, the returned god of Earth, wanted me to know that I was forbidden from altering her world further. She also gave me the coordinates of the location of the alien who had sent his own kind out to torture me as a child. I was slightly offended by the level of ego the new god of Earth flaunted, but was also grateful I could finally find justice for every torture I had encountered as a child. After a short goodbye to Julia, the body and I found ourselves soaring through space to confront my childhood demons. As we approached their planet, I came to understand the blackness of the world made the rest of empty space look like the sun. It was a level of darkness I cannot explain. The body and I floated in place far outside the atmosphere of this abnormal, beyond black mass as we studied the code of the planet. Earth's new god had highlighted the code of the alien commander in red. I wanted to just delete the code of the alien commander, but the body introduced another option. He spoke. "Julia said you are good at erasing things, and I am like you, deleting other beings as I see fit." I looked at the body as he glanced at this terrifying alien home planet. The body continued. "Let's give this one a chance." With the new god of Earth managing everything, I had time to dig deeper into this world. The body verified that these aliens operated in basic code and were not a threat to us, as I formed a platform and habitat for the alien to exist in as we spoke to it. While everything this commander did was clearly identifiable. While everything this commander did was clearly supposed to be fuck it. The individual actions, communications, and even thoughts of this alien were difficult to comprehend, as most all the code reflected a culture and language that was incredibly foreign to me. The body helped transition both of us into a state that was unreachable by this alien, and upon finishing the quarters for the alien, I placed him within it, standing before us. The alien was behind a silver wall. We could see in, but all the alien could see inside was black. I designed the cage of sorts to take anything we said to the creature to translate for the alien. It worked both ways. Initially, the alien just made screeching noises and tried to find a way out, so we repeatedly attempted to calm the alien. As we spoke, the alien stopped trying to find a way out and spoke directly up, even though we were on each side of the cage. My assumptions as a child were verified the more we listened to the creature talk. Much of the population of this planet was built on fear. They were so afraid of outside powers that they had entire space programs to seek out and destroy sources of energy coming from creatures that were or could become more powerful than them. The body brought something to my attention. I see God has dealt with these creatures before. Looking at the code, I can see both him and you cross paths when you were just a baby. Pulling forward the information, I verified what the body had pointed out. God had arranged for these aliens to figure out a way to kill me before I could even talk. The code revealed that God could crack the rock in my head, but never destroy it entirely, as it would always regenerate. God was using these creatures obsessed with fear to figure out how to eliminate the main threat to his own existence. He had convinced them I was destined to kill them, which he knew the one who was truly threatened was him. The body exploded with another discovery, following the very same code even further back. Daniel, your physical code starts at the date of your birth, but the stone in your head has a code that was created much further back, with your mother, your original mother. My eyes darted up at the body. I replied with less shock and optimism than the body. My mother is the new god of Earth. The body looked concerned and replied, You say that like you knew. I replied, I'm sorry. This is just a lot. A loud screech came from the cage once more. The creature was threatening us, despite how obvious it was that it was at a disadvantage. I was frustrated and distracted at this point. The mother I was born of wanted nothing to do with me, and the mother who created me didn't even bother to tell me who I was or anything. Or anything outside where these aliens were. While deep in thought, I felt the body wrap his arms around me. It was the first time I ever felt a giant hug me. I felt so powerless. The body spoke. Hey, cheer up, okay? Still upset, I chuckled a little, then patted the body on the side to let him know he could stop squeezing me now. I rubbed my eyes and began modifying the alien's code. As I worked on the alien, the body spoke up. Ew, you thought your mom was hot? I stopped in the middle of coding. What? No. It's not my birth mom, and I didn't even know this lady was my original mom. I mean, she made a rock, not my body or anything. The body laughed explosively. You thought your mom was hot, now you know she's still your mom, and you still think she's hot. Glaring at the body, I finished the alien's code. I had erased all code revolving around my existence from this moment on. The alien was returned to their home, and I additionally returned the code I had physically destroyed as a child. All the families and soldiers I killed, sending them back to their planet without the memory of what happened or the memory of my existence. Even the coordinates of our planet were erased from their navigation systems and records. The body observed me do this and spoke. Okay, for a guy who likes his mom, that was pretty kind of you not to just kill them all. I smirked and replied, You know I only have eyes for Julia, bud. And gross. The body laughed, saying, I know. And after returning everything was in place on the dark planet, we returned to our own. Peace seemed to be winning. I was so happy to be a part of that. Happy to be a part of you. Fucking fuck. Chapter 24. Mother. It had been years since I had seen the god of Earth. The body had altered his own code to be a more normal-sized human, although he was still well over 6 feet tall. He mostly spent his time playing video games and racing vehicles in amateur circuits. Julia and I had been talking about having a baby and making our relationship more official. And the world itself? It was hard to find a single thing wrong with it. The economy was designed for the well-being of all. TV shows no longer reflected drama from our own planet, but were most all based on what life was like on other planets, with other gods. Even Kull himself was not the origin of all things. There were many more worlds with many more creators as corrupt and even more corrupt than our own former god. I hadn't bothered to visit my family that brought me into my human form 20 years ago. I felt like they were still better off without me. The same goes with my school friend David, and even the house near the creek I grew up by. That was all a past I didn't want in my future. And I was certain with our new god, they were all happy anyway. Just like the new god of Earth instructed me. I didn't physically alter the code of her planet or the people on it whatsoever. But I didn't need to, as my original mother was perfect, and no matter how much I evolved, she would still be wiser than me. And that, my friends, is the end of Reaper's Creek. Good job, Dr. Business. And with chapters 22, 23, and 24, that brings us to the end of Reaper's Creek. I don't have much to say because there's not much that could be said. Somebody wrote a book over the weekend. They watched a bunch of Doctor Who, thought they were original, and tried to sneak in a book, thinking they might get lucky. Well, you didn't get lucky. I want to read this part. And this is for a special person out there. A father's love for his child. Even I cannot change that. You give everything you have to your children. I just wish they didn't have to suffer because of my mistakes. Those are words to be pondered on. But this has been Doctorpiece Theater. And I'm very proud of all of you for being able to stick around with me and do this. I know it was hard and unenjoyable and boring and stupid and frustrating. But I'm very proud of all of you. And you showed me something. And it was something I needed to see. Well, as always, my friends,